Hey guys, it's Eric from foundersbeta.com, and I'm so excited to have the founder of Super Pawbox, Alize. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so before we dive into all the questions, I'd like to give out a shout out to our sponsors, our friends at headway.io. If you want to validate, build a company, check them out. So tell us a little bit about yourself and the startup.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Dubai and then I moved to Waterloo to pursue my undergraduate degree. And I guess I liked Canada too much, so I sort of stuck around, moved to Toronto,
Mhm.
and then I worked in sales, marketing, project coordination. I think after a few years of working in all those different fields, I launched Super Pawbox in 2020.
Awesome. So what was the inspiration behind this? Like, was it one day you're like, I should do a startup, or was this based on mainly your experience?
Right. So I've always loved dogs. I had a dog growing up, and I knew that I wanted to do something that was related to them. And well, the mission of Super Pawbox is twofold. One is to make puppyhood easier for puppy parents, and the second one is to give back to animal rescues all around the world, something that is very close to my heart. So the inspiration sort of came when I got my dog Kayo in 2019, and I guess being a first time dog parent, it was extremely overwhelming, very stressful. I
Mhm.
didn't know what was appropriate for him, what wasn't, what to do. And I was like, there needs to be something that caters to new puppy parents. And there was a company in the States, which was great, but just due to customs and regulations around that, everything was a bit delayed. And then I'm like, there isn't one in Canada that caters to such a niche market, which is puppies. So I took that as an inspiration. I did some market research. I'm like, is this something that people actually want? Is this actually a problem that customers want to have solved? And majority of the people who took the survey showed quite an interest in that. And I took that as a sign, like, okay, I'm just gonna dive right into it. And that sort of led to me starting Super Box.
Right. So what was it like when you actually wanted to validate this? Like, did you just go out to your network and say, hey, this is what I'm doing? How did you go about gauging that interest? Because that's always hard to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of it was, so I basically created a survey that had very basic questions. First, I tried to see, okay, where is my audience located? Where is the most
Right.
demand? So it was about location, information about their dog, how old their dog is,
Hmm.
problems that they've faced. Would they be interested in a monthly box that had toys, treats, a training guide that was curated by an actual dog trainer?
Hmm.
So I send that across a lot of
Hmm.
Facebook groups, and just through that, and even just people I knew within the downtown area, I'd be like, hey, I'm trying to start something. Can you share it? So they shared it, and just the response that I got from the surveys, it led to, okay, this is an actual
Hmm.
idea that could work out.
Right, right. So and then I guess you just went out and you just launched it. What was the early version like
So it was
of the site? I
so I
mean,
had
yeah.
this right so I had this idea, right, that I wanted, that
Right,
okay, it's going to be a monthly box. So I had a very basic idea.
right, right.
The next step was, okay, what is my North Star? Like, where am I actually trying to get this, and how do I get this?
Right.
So it was breaking it down into smaller steps. And the thing is, like,
Mhm.
this is the first business I've ever built.
Right, right.
And it was a lot of self-doubt and uncertainty, knowing,
Mhm.
like, okay, how do you even go about doing this? So it took a lot of research into competitors. What are they doing? Talking to people, reaching out to distributors, and building out that supply chain,
Mhm.
and then eventually talking to influencers and seeing what they were saying, what their feedback was on the boxes.
Right,
And it just sort of, through that relationship, I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do. This is the direction I need to go. And I just focused on that.
right. So I think, yeah, part of the key thing is always talking to the users, right? So,
Absolutely. Building
yeah,
that relationship with customers, and because that's the important part, right? Your customers are the ones that will tell you like, hey, this is what your product is missing. This
Hmm.
is what I loved. This is what I didn't like. And build your product you build your product through your feedback.
Right. So, so I guess you got all that data. You know, you got some interested user, like, and then yeah. So I guess at some point you launched the site, right?
At some point, yes. The very early version of the site was broken. I was so focused on having it perfect with all these
Right.
customizations that I wanted.
Right. Right.
Um, and it just wasn't working out because with customizations came
Hmm.
bugs that had to be fixed. With
Right.
that
Right.
came hiring experts. Just a lot of time and money went into
Mm.
it.
Right. Right.
And I remember vividly, it was a week or two away from Thanksgiving
Mhm.
last year. And I'm like, this is my one shot to see is could this work?
Mhm.
So I stripped the
Right.
website of all its customizations and everything. Very basic, um, very easy customer journey, and I
Right.
launched it. And since then, it got traction. It grew, and last earlier this year, I had an agency to rebuild the landing page that would lead to higher conversions
Mhm.
and a reduced bounce rate. And they did
Right.
exactly that. So um, it all worked out at the end.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. So what was the
Yeah,
feeling like when you actually had like the first set of like users coming on the site, or like
it
first
was
set
so
of
surreal.
customers, right?
It was very surreal. I remember when I would in the beginning, whenever I would get this ching sound that Shopify makes when a
Right,
user
right.
checks out, I would message everyone. I would take a screenshot, like new customer, like this is so exciting, and I would get so happy. And the feeling has
Right.
stayed constant.
Mhm.
So it was definitely very surreal that someone would actually trust me to create a box for their dog, which
Mhm.
someone with a dog knows that they're part of the family.
Mhm. Right. So talk about like the product, or like what do the customers like come, like how does the process work, like for
Right.
somebody who's new on the
So
site and want to use this?
Right. So when you're on the website, you see what we're all about. You see what the box offers, and then once you actually go to the next step, which is to create your dog's profile,
Mhm.
you have a very short survey that asks you about your dog size, age, allergies, how big they will get, anything else we should know,
Right.
because the box is catered towards the dog, right? That's the only reason we exist, is to create a box that is specifically made to the likings of your dog.
Mhm.
And once you give us all the information, you select a plan, which is monthly, 3 months, 6 and 12 months. And then once you check out, depending if it's the weekend, the box gets sent out the very next business day. But yeah, we always try to ship it out as soon as we get the order.
Nice. So speaking of sales, right? Like, sales is often so hard with the startup, like as you mentioned, how could
Yeah,
somebody come and like, kind of have that credibility, but also build that relationship with the customers. So do you
absolutely.
have any tips for our audience that are looking to like generate that first, set of paying users, right? Like paying customers. Anything that you went through that might help them?
Um, when it comes to getting customers, I think the one most important thing is to build trust around your
Mhm.
product. Um, because initially people don't know about you, so it's up to you
Right.
to portray that either through social media or through customized emails to anyone who signs up. Because I remember someone who would create a profile, and if I see that they checked out a product but didn't purchase, I would go and reach out and be like, hey, thanks so much for visiting us. I saw that you saw this plan. Are there any questions I can answer for you? So taking that extra step and figuring out like, okay, how can I get this customer to trust me?
Right.
To Because during COVID, um, things were extremely hard. So having customers take that extra budget out, that extra amount from
Right.
their budget for their dog and give to you,
Mhm.
it was a huge deal. So you have to make sure
Right.
that you didn't let them down. So I would say like build that relationship with your customer, show them that, hey, this is what you're all about, and get them to and build that trust, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, because credibility is a huge in
It's
startups,
huge.
right?
Absolutely.
Because of course, like what people people I think need to like a lot of early stage startups need to realize that sales is based on relationships, right? Like
Yes.
you read the content, you engage, right? Then you go kind of go make purchase, right? But I
Yeah,
think a lot of
absolutely.
times, right? I think a lot of times it's like people think, oh, you put a landing page and somebody goes buys it,
No,
right?
I wish it were that simple, but no. For from where I what I think is that the success of your company is based on the relationships you've built with your customers
Right.
and the trust you have with them. If there's no trust, then hey, there's no company, right? Because then you won't have any customers at the end.
Right, right, absolutely. Because I think especially for bootstrap startups, right? The key is all about paying customers, right?
Yeah,
And I think without it, there's no business, right? So,
there's no business. Yeah.
right, right, 100%. So, yeah, moving on to the next question. Do you have any tips for our audience, like in general, when it comes to like, building a startup or any tips that kind of helped you along the way? Because we know how difficult this journey is, right?
Yes. Like I mentioned before, how I was so focused on having all these customizations on my website before launching, and
Hmm.
I would say don't. Perfection is going to be your enemy.
Right.
Don't be so bogged down into the details where you want everything to be perfect.
Hmm.
If you have a viable product, just launch it. You can change the color scheme later on. You can change the pictures. You
Right.
can make it perfect later, but timing is everything. And just, just launch. Just get started on it, and the rest will fall into place.
Right? Because I think MVP is kind of hard. We want all these features, right?
Yeah, you can't have everything, right? That's one of the main things. You just gotta like, okay, this is the goal, and I just need to see this is something that is actually wanted if
Mhm.
customers are going to
Right,
come. And then you build out a nice looking site and everything.
right. Because you can always go back, change things up. But I feel
Yeah,
like I think that timing that you mentioned about like getting that
it's
product out
key.
early, right? Because I think that's what you mentioned, right? You went out and kind of built something like I guess faster, right? Or
Yeah, the one mistake I did do was that when it was, I guess you could say when it was prime COVID puppy time,
hmm.
um, I was too focused on perfecting my site,
Right,
hence the lesson I learned. So I launched it later on. And if I'd launched it earlier when it was, I guess you could say April, June, I
hmm.
don't know who knows where it could have been, but I launched it later and so grateful for how far I've built the company. But like I mentioned, don't be so bogged down into details because the opportunity will not come again.
Right. That's right. Because I think the moment you think about all those things, it just you may never launch. Keep building, right?
Yeah, keep perfecting everything.
Right. But I also like the fact that you emphasize on building those relationships as well with the early customers, right? Because I
Absolutely.
think a lot of people just like keep building features, but if you're not marketing or if you're not talking to users, like who are you building it for anyway, right?
Yeah. And the one thing is that people will always trust someone else's word
Hmm.
than a social media post,
Right. Right.
right? So it's building that relationship and knowing, like, okay, if I build that customer's trust,
Hmm.
build that relationship, and they might refer me to someone else to whom I can build another relationship with, right? So
Right.
having that relationship with customers is in a way a make or break for the success of your company.
Absolutely. And I think for early stage companies, referrals is also very important, right? Like you
Yeah,
have like your paying customers referring someone else or referring that
right.
and they become more like ambassadors, right? Free marketing, right?
Yeah,
So great.
absolutely.
So for our audience that want to get in touch with you, what are some best ways?
So you can check us out at superpawbox.com. We are running a promo right now.
Mhm.
So that's one way. Another way is through our Instagram, which is superpaw.box.
Super product packs. Excellent. Well, thank you so much again for
Thanks, Eric.
joining today, and we look forward to the next chapter with the startup.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again.